You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. You can find me and my consulting work at julieharrisoliver.com, and you can find the podcast at theother50percent.com, all spelled out in letters, and on all the podcast places. Today we are doing a deep dive into pipeline programs with Karen Horne. Karen Horne is a senior executive with over 20 years of experience within the entertainment industry. She's been recognized as a diversity and inclusion pioneer and pipeline builder. She's a Senior Vice President, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, North America at Warner Brothers Discovery. In this role, she oversees the DEI efforts for creative talent development pipeline programs, workforce, content, and production, while working closely with the Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer to create global strategy for the company. Prior to joining WarnerMedia, Karen spent over a decade at NBCUniversal, where she was Vice President, Programming, Talent Development, and Inclusion. In this role, Karen was responsible for overseeing in front of and behind the camera primetime diversity efforts. The programs and initiatives she created and/or developed became the industry's gold standard and a blueprint for many other companies. She designed, implemented, and oversaw Nickelodeon's Writers' Fellowship program. She was the Director of Writer Development and Special Projects for Walt Disney Studios and Walt Disney Network Television. She was also a co-producer for the HBO Emmy Award-winning animated series Spawn. Karen has spoken both nationally and internationally on diversity and inclusion best practices and has been honored with several awards and recognitions for her diversity and inclusion work and her service to underrepresented communities. She serves on the boards of Respectability, Montclair State University School of Communication and Media, USC's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, the Alliance of Women Directors, the Bay Area's Urban League, and is a member of several entertainment industry organizations. We talked about the different kinds of pipeline programs, how they work, why we still need them, all the things. Here, have a listen. Karen Horne, welcome to The Other 50%.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Me too. Now, I know right now you're the SVP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of North America at Warner Brothers Discovery. That's impressive. Why don't you tell us what is in your scope?
I have remit over everything our company does, and even things that we should be doing or we want to be doing in that through the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens and within North America. And so that means working alongside our business leaders to help them embed DEI in everything they do, working with our people and culture, which is what we call our HR teams, to make sure that our workforce is represented fairly, that they're counted fairly, that they're being promoted fairly, that they're being interviewed fairly. So working across workforce on the creative side, working with our teams who oversee our pipeline programs, our content, our production programs to make sure that our productions are safe and inclusive places. Work you know very well, Julie, and working to make sure that our content is authentic content and that the stories we tell accurately reflect the people we tell them for or tell them to, and just working across and making sure we have pipeline programs that provide access and opportunities for people wanting to break into our industry at all levels and in all areas.
You are doing the Lord's work.
Just let him shine down on me, please.
Can we talk a little bit? Let's just go through really quick your career and kind of how you led to this work. Because I think you started more of a creative role. Let's talk about how you got here.
So from the way back, I studied broadcasting in college. I wanted to be Barbara Walters, which as I get older, I recognize the audiences get younger and they're like, and I'm always asking, do you know who Barbara Walters is? And thankfully people still know who she is. But I wanted to be a broadcast journalist and studied broadcast journalism in school. And then the senior year of college, I got a job working for ABC and ended up at ABC Sports. And I am a huge sports fan. Some may call me obnoxious and I don't care because, my teams are, my teams and I'm going to root for them. But I'm a huge overall sports fan. I will watch log rolling, which was actually an Olympic or sport on Wide World of Sports at one time. Anyway, so I got a job working for ABC Sports. I worked for someone who was a rising star at the company and in the industry. And he was eventually promoted and moved to Los Angeles to be president of ABC Entertainment. And he moved me with him, which is where I learned about the scripted part of it. I, worked on our shows and development and current programming and all aspects of the entertainment world, as a president of a network did. I did everything. I read everything that came across the desk and learned about that. And I took classes about, like, if you're going to give notes, how to give notes, whether I hate this because it sucks, or I hate this and this is why, and how to develop it a little bit more. So I did that. And then the person I worked for was promoted again and moved back to New York to be head of all of ABC. And I stayed in Los Angeles and ran a not-for-profit film organization called the Black Filmmaker Foundation. And I think it was really there that kind of cemented my love for finding and nurturing new talent. And I did that. And during that time, while I was working there, I also sold a series to HBO. It was an adult animated series based on a comic book called Spawn. It won 3 Emmys each year. 3 Emmys.
Hold on. You just said that so casually. While I was doing a full-time job, I also sold a series to HBO.
And I was pregnant and had my first child at the same time as well. So, yeah.
Well, that's weird because I thought women just kind of fell off the face of the earth when they had babies and didn't produce anything. Huh.
Well, according to some.
Oh my God. Were you just doing that on the side? Like, how'd
No,
you do that?
because my husband is a huge comic book fan and found the property, and we were like, look, I moved here from New York, and he, I married this cool guy, and he was like, I want to go to Comic-Con, and I was like, what the heck is Comic-Con? And so he kept on saying, let's go, and I was like, it's in San Diego. I hadn't been to San Diego, and I was like, okay, fine, let's go. And he finds this property. Now he knows comic books and knows that world really well, finds this property and shows it to me, and it's like, you got to look at this. And I was like, all right, it's a Archie's comic, like Richie Rich, or like
Whatever.
like Veronica, like I don't read this stuff. And I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing love story. And he was like, a love story? This is just the greatest like action. It's a black lead. The character's black. And he knew the artist Todd McFarlane from his work at Marvel when he drew Spider-Man and reimagined him. And so he knew him, and he actually fostered that relationship, but he was working at Full Circle Warner Brothers at the time and couldn't do anything with it. So I took it to HBO, where I sat where my offices at the Black Filmmaker Foundations was. I took it to HBO and actually worked with someone that Andy, my husband, had worked with earlier, sold it there, and then developed it and produced it. So I kind of inherited the thing, and that's how it came. So it was really a kind of a whole Horne production, but my name's on those credits. I developed it, worked with writers and doing the work that I do with writers, and helped develop the look of it, which was very close to the comic book anyway. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Very cool.
But before it actually premiered on HBO, Disney calls me and asked me if I would be interested in running what is now their ABC writer program, director program, and being a part of the creative team for what's now ABC Studios. It was Touchstone Studios back then. And so I did that job, and that's really kind of where I started with the pipeline world and working in finding and providing pathways for pipeline talent to come into our industry, which has historically been closed off to underrepresented talent. So I did that, got pregnant with my second child, and realized that I couldn't lead a department at Disney then. It's probably different now, but couldn't lead a department then and have 2 children. And so Nickelodeon had been pursuing me to create writing and talent development efforts there. So I left Disney and went over to Nickelodeon, where I created their talent development programs, their writing program, and then did that, worked in animation for a year before going to NBCUniversal, where I was for 10 and a half years. And while I was there, the programs that we created were really considered some of the gold standard in the industry. We created some things that I'm super, super proud of. Directing program specifically for women called Female Forward, in addition to our directing program for underrepresented male directors, which is the Emerging Directing Program. We had a program for late night writers that changed the landscape in late night television and really was the first place where women, because late night television is historically run by white guys. And so it was the first place where
Well-read Nell's book.
Yes, exactly. And we had her speak as, in fact. And so anyway, so we created that late night writers workshop, and it was really groundbreaking. And some of the most prolific writers now in that landscape came through that program. And I'm super proud of that. And so we had, a lot of programs there. And then I left NBC Universal and came over to then WarnerMedia, and started there 4 days before we had to shut everything down and work from home. So we built our teams remotely. And I think, during the 3 years, that the first 3 years there, we created probably about 20 different pipeline programs. And now with the Discovery acquisition of our company, I moved into a bigger role where I not only work alongside the people who run our pipeline programs and help do that. And I just created one in celebration of our 100th anniversary of the company, which I'm super, super proud of. And I will probably mark it alongside Female Forward and Late Night as one of the things in my career I'm most proud of. And that is, we're calling it just the Warner Brothers 100 anniversary short film initiative. And the company came to me and said, what can you do in celebration of our 100th anniversary along the pipeline, with pipeline programs? And so I pitched an idea of reimagining some of the most iconic Warner Brothers titles that we could get the rights to do, free and clear, and reimagining them through the lens of underrepresented filmmakers. And so at a time where our company was cutting budgets and cutting personnel, I got a substantial budget to do this. And so we partnered with 6 different film organizations and identified 6 underrepresented filmmakers who are now given money. We're giving them $200,000 each to do a film that's under 20 minutes, so just under 20 minutes.
Oh, that's real money.
That's real money. Yeah.
Yeah,
But not only are
incredible.
we giving them those money, we're giving them resources. We are partnering with a producer who makes low budget films for Warner Brothers, who has like the infrastructure that they can go through his payroll, his legal, his insurance, to set up the LLCs through him. And then they'll have access to the lot and have access to post and a lot of the things that are expensive, but they'll have it at free or reduced fees as well.
Incredible.
Yeah, I'm super proud of it.
I want to back up just a minute, and then I want to dig into pipelines in general.
Mm-hmm.
You said at Disney you couldn't be a mother of 2 children and run a department. Was that because of the conditions of the day? Was that because it was too consuming? Like, why?
All of the above. All of the above. I think, Disney used to have the edict that, if you work at Disney boot camp, you can work anywhere, right? I'm not going to say exactly what they used to say about it, but
I started my career there too. I know.
But also there was a thing if you didn't come to work on, Sunday,
Saturday, don't bother
Saturday,
coming Sunday.
coming on Sunday, right? And I was really a team of one. It was just me and my assistant. And so we had, not only did I, oversee our writing program and our directing program, we also worked with our features team and with writers there. But I also was a part of their current, and development teams. So I also worked with them there and that work. And so it was just, I wanted to be present. I wanted to have some type of life to give my children. At the same time, my son was just turning 4 and a newborn. And so Nickelodeon actually allowed me to do this as a consultant. So instead of becoming a full-time employee for them, I did it as technically a consultant. Doing that gave me the freedom to say I'm going to work from home at a time when no one worked from home. So
yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Okay, now I know that the pipeline programs are kind of your special sauce, and you've done it in ways that are different. I remember Sarah Fisher was on this podcast a while ago talking about your program at ABC, and the difference being that people ended up with a job at the end, which doesn't always happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about how you think about pipeline programs and how you design them and really what we're trying to solve?
So I look at where is there a demand and how do I create a supply for that. So for instance, if I take the late night program as an example, I was on a panel and it was a huge Vanity Fair article that was released and David Letterman was on the cover, and it was about the lack of diversity in late night. And so the panel moderator said, don't ask her about late night. She doesn't work in that space. And he was right. I didn't. But then I thought to myself, why don't I? If I can do this and have success in primetime scripted, why can't I do it in late night? So I created a supply for where there was a demand. And what we did at NBC at the time, and Warner Brothers Discovery is doing this as well, we paid for that writer, the company, technically it has to come from a show's budget, blah, blah, blah. But we allowed the overage for those shows to have these writers that came through our program be placed on their shows. Because you can talk about, people can be programmed to death. There are people who have gone from one program to another, to another, to another, and still are trying to break into the industry.
Yeah.
It's us really putting our money where our mouth is. If we are taking this talent, we're supporting this talent, we're vetting the talent. It's harder oftentimes to get into any of these programs than it is to get into any Ivy League school. Yeah, we have on average for a writing program probably about 3,000 applications for like 8 spots. Those odds aren't very good. So you have to be super talented to get in. That said, we know that part of the problem of people not having enough writers or directors on sets is because people go with who they know and who they're comfortable with. And most oftentimes, those people look like the showrunners, which are white guys, right? So, like,
Yeah.
which often and have been historically white guys. So, what we try to do is say, okay, we will support this writer on your show. And at NBC, and I don't think they do this any longer, but at NBC, we supported a writer on a show for 3 years at the staff writer level. So in year 2, if the show kept that writer and promoted them to the next level, which is story editor, we would pay for the staff writer portion of their salary. And we would do the same in year 3 if they got promoted to executive story editor. We'd still, so by that time, that writer is now a part of the family, right? And that ensures their success. We're doing that with our directing program at Warner Brothers Discovery as well. We'll pay for the episode of the director to direct through our directing program, and we'll pay for up to 2 years for a writer to be on any of our shows as well. And look, the thing is that people have often talked about, oh, the diversity hire, or, I challenge that, because the people who got in those spots did a lot more to get there than those people who are just shepherded it in because they're
Yeah.
Buffy's, cousin at the club, right? So, when we bought our first house, it was in a gated community, and I will say I'm liberal to a fault. And one of my neighbors who I loved dearly said to me, like, why are you so liberal? Because if you live in this neighborhood, you must make as much money as I do. And I go, I probably make more than you do because I don't come from inherent wealth. I didn't inherit my dad's company like you did, right? But I'm this way because I had access to policies and programs that helped me get an education and do the work that I'm doing. And I'm working harder to make sure that I keep that. So I think that anyone who says that, oh, they're the diversity hire and they're othered, they don't recognize the challenges to get to where they are or the talent that they have in order to be there.
Well, they've had to work harder and be better and
Absolutely.
be more persistent. Now, and also that whole scenario is a bit infuriating, right? Because why wouldn't people hire them in the first place? Like, have you been able to diagnose what is that barrier inside the brain of the people hiring that you have to pay for that hire for 2-3 years in order to get it to stick, even though it's a proven entity?
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you go to the same hairdresser or the same dry cleaner time and time again?
I
Or do
do.
you? Yeah. And you do that because you're comfortable with them. You know them. They, that they're going to do the job and they're whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or if I would challenge you to say that if you tried something new, you would do so upon recommendation from someone you trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone said to you, Julie, go to this hairdresser. She's really, really good. And, like I've gone to her and I'm telling you, that's, it's not different in the work we do, right? So people are going to go with who they're comfortable with. A writer's room, if we're going to use writers as an example, is a very sacred, small, intimate place. I often describe the writer's room as an intimate dinner party, and people are invited by the host, the showrunner, because they want them around their dinner table, right? Oftentimes, they want people who look like them around that dinner table. And that's stupid in my
Right.
opinion,
It's
because
infuriating.
it's just infuriating. Like we've often talked about, like, if you're building a toolbox and you already have 7 screwdrivers, you don't need an 8th one. You need a hammer. You
Yeah.
need something different in order to build the best toolbox possible. So I know the why people do it. I don't agree with the why people do it because I think I know the richness of the diversity of our storytelling, which it makes us better content providers. It makes us better content creators. So when we look at that story, whether it's through the lens of a writer or through the lens of a director or even an actor, how they portray a character, you can tell when it's authentically done. Like if you're telling a story that has any amount of diversity in it, if there's authentic voices there, then you can tell the difference immediately. And as we look at the business for this, our world is becoming more diverse than not diverse. We know that salsa outsells ketchup. We know that tortillas outsell bread. We know that Latinos open movies larger than any other groups. We know that Black people watch television in real time than any other group, and we all want to see ourselves reflected on screen. So if we're not addressing that, we're leaving money on the table. So the
I,
business of diversity
I
is
think
really important.
McKinsey quantified it, and it was something like $10 billion,
$10
$10
billion
billion with a B.
with a B. So if we look at this, because we all know that we're more business than we are show, right? If we're looking at the business of it, why would we do that? Why would we say? And, we are now having advertisers who are saying, I want to give money to Black creators. I want to give money to diverse creators. I want to do that. Like, we need to follow the footsteps of our advertisers because they know who's buying, right? They know who's buying because that's what they sell to, right? So when they're saying to us, we need more diversity, then we should listen.
Yeah. How would you answer? Because, of course, the backlash to this is agents saying to their writers, well, we can't hire white men right now, so you're out of luck. I know you're mid-career, but I don't know what to tell you. It's it's the diversity hires causing all the problems in the industry. How
Mm-hmm.
do you respond to that?
I call foul, or New Jersey, I call BS on that because it's just the agents not doing their jobs properly. Nobody's not going to get hired in this. There's so much of this pie. The pie is bigger and bigger every day. There's so much of the pie going around. If the person is really, really good, the show is going to hire them. It's really offensive, if you ask me, that dialogue, that narrative is being told because no one's not going to hire someone if they're excited about them and their work. So, and if we go back to a lot of the people who are on staff, because with subsidizing from the companies, that's not taking money away from their budget, that's additive. So for anyone who says that, it's just not true, and it is a cop out for agents when they say that.
Agreed. If your client is mediocre, tell them.
Tell them.
Tell
Yeah.
them so they can
Tell
get
them and
better.
help them become better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you respond to, and I'm sorry, I'm throwing all the critics
Yeah, let's do it.
at you. How would you respond to people who say, well, you're just putting up another gate that people have to go through to even get into the program?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. The built landscape is not fair. It's not equitable.
It's
So
not merit based? What are you
it's
saying?
not merit based. And so no one has to go through these programs to get into our industry. And I know that most people who get into these programs will eventually get into the industry because they're freaking good in order to get into them. This is just something that helps us escalates it. Like it's something that helps advance them faster. These programs generally don't help them become better at their craft. They're already really good at their craft. What they do is give them the exposure. It gives them some of the things that the business part of it that they may not know, but it gives them the access to the industry, which has not historically been there for these underrepresented talent. And so it's not another gate. It is actually another door. It's a doorway. It's not a gate. It's a doorway for entry into the industry. There are people that I worked with in my very first role at Disney that I still keep in touch with. Most of them are now showrunners and trying to get them to hire I want my kids to be Nepo babies. but I don't mind saying it. I'm the first generation in this industry that could practice that, right? But it's not a gate. It's a doorway. Those are not gates. They're doorways. They're any opportunity. Like I often say I'm more Malcolm than Martin by any means necessary. And so if people can get into this industry because of a program, then there are so many people who are successfully working in this industry. And I will tell you, I've always, kind of measured my success by when people forget that they've come through a program and they claim them on for themselves. And I say to my teams all the time, like, that's success. Like, don't get upset about that because that's success.
Even when they forget and they say, I discovered this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I got to tell you, when I was at NBC and we would do staffing meetings and the agents would come in with their books and pitch writers to us. And I would just go, that's mine. Oh, that one's mine too. That's mine too. And everybody would be like, that's hers. Like, I'm like, don't pitch to me. I started their careers.
I know they're good.
Yeah, I know they're good.
That's funny. So
Yeah.
what do you look for when you're selecting the people to go through the programs?
Someone who has a real point of view in their storytelling. And again, that storytelling could be in any format. It could be in film, it could be in directors, writers, or even actors. It's their point of view. It's how they tell a story. I often say, like, there's probably only about 5 or 6 different stories in the world, right? And it's how you tell those stories that make them different. It's how you tell those stories. So, I would say for writers, someone who has a good grasp of dialogue. So, for television particularly, film, you can get away with big set pieces and boom, whatever. So the dialogue is a little different, the needs for that in film than in television. But television, it's very intimate. It's inside your living room. It's like theater. It's like stage. And you need to have a good grasp of that, a good ability to build a world and to tell a story and to create characters. And those are some of the things that I think that any writer has to do to have success.
So how accomplished do they need to be already before getting into a program? Like, do they need to have a whole portfolio?
Yeah, they should have a whole, particularly for television, they have to have some type of a portfolio because television is a game of repeating, right? So it's a game of, like, not just like, I always say that a great idea doesn't make a great television show. A great showrunner makes a great television show. And what makes a great showrunner is someone who can not only do the business, but who can do the story year over year over year, episode over episode over episode. So how do you take that great idea and create a great show from it is what makes you a great television writer. And so, yeah, that's they should have a portfolio because, I will tell you, I've gotten burned 1 or 2 times by, like, just, saying, okay, you gave me this one great script. Well, then they get in the program, like, who wrote the script for them? Like, I was like, this is not what I got submitted to me. My old boss at ABC, when he was president of ABC, told a joke once at our upfront meetings about, like, us saying that they got this great script for the pilot script and something like that. It's a better joke than I can remember, but they were like, oh, that's the pilot, this is the series. Like, so we want to make sure that a person has a portfolio, that we know that they are prolific writers, that they can do this over and over again. And that are some of the things that we're really looking for in a candidate.
So it's not enough to have the one script that is your dream, that you are going to take this script to the ends of the earth and not have 10 more in your pocket.
Maybe not 10, but at least 2 or 3 more for sure. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't all, like, look, if you have a great television script and then you have a bunch of great short stories or you have a great play, people in TV don't like to read features, so that's too long. But
That's a good note.
Yeah, but if you even have a great feature or something like that, you have to have more than one thing in order to get into any program. Yeah.
And okay, a couple directions I want to go. Are you doing a program now that's like mid-career, leveling people up to showrunners?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a showrunners program.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's probably a little beyond mid-career. Those are for people who are, well, I'll tell you how it came back. We kept hearing over and over again from our creative executives that the problem is that there are not enough diverse showrunners because of short orders of series, the pandemic. And what they were finding is that, writers have really gotten promoted and matriculated and have quickly gone from, like, entry level to senior level writers on staff without knowing how to produce a show or learning any of those other things that it takes to be a showrunner.
The business part.
The business part of it. So we decided, the WGA has a fantastic showrunners program, but we decided why WGA doesn't own the license to showrunners program. If our executives are saying that this is one of the things, and I will tell you the importance of having more diversity at the very top in a showrunner's position, because we know it trickles down. We know that if there is a person who is underrepresented, diverse in some way at the top, they're going to hire talent, they're going to hire writers, they're going to hire actors, they're going to hire crew who is as well. And so in order to really kind of make a change in this industry, we need to start at the top. So we try to figure out how to do that. And we partnered with our creative executives across the board through Warner Brothers Television, HBO, and HBO Max to say, who are some of the people who are at like the co-EP level or the supervising producer level, right? Who are ready to step into the showrunner's role that you want to nominate for this program. So it was a nomination only program. And it was nominated through our creative executives. And our first cohort was, I think we only wanted to do 10, and we ended up with maybe 13 because there were so many great candidates. And we built a component into this program that the WGA doesn't have, and that's shadowing. For any writer who's never produced their own episode on set, we got our show. There was only two who hadn't, and one was more comedy driven. So Abbott Elementary stepped up and let him shadow on their show, because it's really important to understand how to produce a show if you're going to be a showrunner. So we built a shadowing component in it, but we also had a lot of the people who have worked for the WGA and helping those programs have overall deals, and they're part of our family at Warner Brothers Television. So John Wells did his budgeting boot camp, and it was really super successful, and I'm looking forward to the next go around of it.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Yeah, I've heard John Wells speak so many times and really gets it.
Yeah,
He's really
fantastic too. He really is. He's just very generous and just really a great guy.
I would like to hear some of your success stories. I remember there was a program with House of Dragons, and I remember the team getting to make phone calls to people, and the phone call is going to change their life.
Luckily with Zoom, we can record them now. So we have some, if you go to the Warner Brothers Discovery Access website, you'll probably see some of the stuff that we've captured there. And because now we can do these calls in person, we can do this where we're actually telling the people in person that they've got, it changes their lives. With the House of the Dragon directors, that it was in the UK, so they call it schemes and not programs. But with that scheme, the directors, we never intended to have them shadow on that show. It was just to give them an opportunity to observe this, not historic, but this huge production from the very beginning. Epic, from the very beginning to the very end. And that show, as big as it was, gave them complete access and was really all in on it. I think some of the successes that have come through the Warner Brothers Television Workshop, which is now the Warner Brothers Discovery Writing Access program, has been around probably longer than any other writing program in the industry. I want to say probably close to 40 something years. And so the success stories from that, I can't even name them. They are creating shows in the industry. I know, I look at the work at NBC with Female Foreign and their directing program. A lot of the people who came through that directing program now have people shadowing under them. So those are just I've been doing this a long time, so I have way too many success stories, and I hate to say one or two because then I'll miss the big one. But there are so many great success stories and so many people that now owe my children jobs. So
the Nepo baby dream will come to pass.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about kind of the breadth of it. Writers, directors, showrunners, animators, filmmakers.
Yeah, if I can jump in a little bit, animators, HBO was then HBO Max. It's going to just be Max now. But, when they had an animation department, came to us and was like, we kind of want to do something around, whatever. And was like, you build, if you dream it, I'll build it. And so we created an animated shorts program for HBO Max. And the theme was only you. What are stories that only you can tell? What that are just your stories. And they are trending trending on HBO Max right now.
Well,
And
they're so good.
thank you. I love it. It's so rewarding. I will tell you, one of the things that continues to drive me here is that it just never gets old for me. Like being able to call a writer and tell them that they're going to get hired on a show, or a director to tell them they have an episode, or an actor to say they want to hire you. Well, to see these animated shorts is where we've turned programs into programming, really is just so amazing to me. It is like what the goal is, right? I know that people don't really jump into this industry because it's a job for them. On the creative side, they jump into it because it's a dream for them. And to be able to help, I've been doing this for so long and I'm still getting goosebumps over it. Like to be able to help facilitate that is really a feeling that it just continues to drive me. It makes all the other BS that you have to put up with a little bit more palatable.
You're making people's dreams come true, or helping their dreams come true. It's
Hmm.
incredible. And then what they put out in the world is so important and
Hmm.
impactful.
It is.
You also did an actors program, right? You mentioned that.
Yeah. Yes.
What did that
Yes.
look like?
It was great. The team, Grace Moss, who now leads our pipeline programs, really kind of created this program. And it was where we really took underrepresented talent. I mean, we had trans actors, actors with disability, every, range of diversity was there, and put them through a really intensive boot camp. Like we put them through a week long. If they weren't local, we brought them out to Los Angeles and housed them, and had some of the best acting coaches work with them, casting directors to work with them, to talk to them about the audition process. And then we put them on tape and we shared it with our casting executives our casting executives, also the casting directors that we work with across the board. So we shared them as much as we could. And it's funny, I see the success through some of the actors, but there's been some great stories from there as well. So yeah, that's what it's that one has proven a little bit harder here at Warner Brothers Discovery, which is so big. But we did something similar when I was at NBC. We did scene showcases, and I look at some of the talent that have come through there, and I see them every day, and I'm super excited. We also did at NBC a nationwide search for stand-up comedians, and you immediately knew that some of those comedians are going to be great writers, and some of them are great talent, and we found some really good talent there as well.
Now, when you're looking at developing a new pipeline program, what are all the elements that you put into it? Because I know there's a big curriculum that goes
Mm-hmm.
with it.
I will tell you, look, what we used to do is just like say, how do you become better at your craft, right? So oftentimes people do write good scripts, but they kind of write from the stream of consciousness, and and they get good stuff. What we try to do is teach them kind of the mechanics of it. There
Like
are
structure?
mechanics. Yeah, structure for sure. Why, even if it's on premium platform, there still are act breaks in that premium platform. And so why act breaks are important, how to button a scene, how to how to dissect your joke, that's something I actually learned to be better at giving notes about, or instruction about, during our late night program. How to take a joke and really kind of dissect it, and not go to the easy joke, but really go to the smarter and more funny way. And how to do that with your characters, how to develop characters. Like if you do this to this character, you're going to kill them down the line, and blah blah blah. Those things that some writer who could theoretically just be thinking about, this is a great idea, I'm going to write it down as a script, may not help them as they start their career, and to give them longevity in this industry. So those are some of the things we've always thought about, like how the mechanics of it. If you're a director, how do you work with your talent? If the number one on the call sheet doesn't like the number two on the call sheet, and they have to do is see, how do you make that work? And that happens a lot, right?
God, how do
So
you make that work?
yeah, there's way, you just have to navigate it. But to do that, also, the importance of being prepared, and being prepared for what happens if someone, gets sick, or what happens if you lose the light and you didn't get your shot. What's the most important part of that? So giving them all the tools to really succeed providing them mentors to help them along the way. Those are some of the things that we try to do in these programs to really arm them to be the most successful, other than just coming into this blind. Yet another reason why people who come through these programs are really well suited for success, because they have all of this, that the company has vetted, and, we've been vetted by the company. Now, additionally, what we do with our programs is throw in a little bit of equity and inclusive training. No one wants to work with a-holes. No one wants to work with a bully. To be a boss doesn't mean you should be bossy. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. A lot of executives fail in that space. They're not good leaders. Being a good leader is a responsibility. How do you lead effectively? How do you lead and get the most from the people who you're working with, right? So we teach them, we don't want anyone who comes from our program, because if you're underrepresented or diverse, it doesn't mean that you cannot still practice an ism, right?
Sure.
So we try to make sure that the people who come from our program not only have the mechanics of how to succeed at their craft, but also are going to be effective leaders and effective contributors who will not fall into any microaggressions or unequitable things that sometimes people do on set.
And I think that is and has to become more and more important, as we need to get that to be as much of a criteria as all the other skills if you're going to be in a position of leadership, right? And I think that's I don't know if it's a hard sell, but it's a kind of a late sell, right? It's like people are just starting to think about that. And I don't know if they're convinced how important that is. But
Well,
that feels like the next step.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And a lot of the work that now that I get a chance to work with workforce, that's what we're trying to instill in our executives as well. Those policies, if you will, not policies, but those qualifications, those qualities of being inclusive, those inclusive qualities, those, how to be a better leader, how to be a leader that recognizes that it's your responsibility to encourage and uplift those voices around you that normally don't get uplifted, like to champion diversity. And so I'm hopeful that if we do that on the workforce side, it will show in our content as well.
Because it's not enough. I mean, in my opinion, it's not enough to be a genius. Because guess what? There are a lot of geniuses. And that's a piece I'm not sure everybody believes yet either, because there's still a lot of propping up of asshole geniuses, not trusting that there's more than one person in the whole wide world that can direct this particular property.
Absolutely.
And how do you think we get all the way there? Is it time? Is it consistency? Like, what do you think?
Well, I know how we got there. Like, we got there because of the built landscape, right? We got there because that we don't work in an equitable world. We don't live in an equitable world. And the systemic racism that has existed in our country and in our industry is still there. It's still
Alive
there.
and well.
It's alive and well. That's what that we can be sure of. So I think like there is a tendency to, like I've always said that in success, I put myself out of work, but I've been doing this for over 20 years and I'm still very much tired at the end of the day because of the workload that I have. So I think how it happens is because, again, if you go back to the same hairdresser analogy, people know that cisgender white male director who can tend to be an asshole also can provide a really great product at the end. We just have to be better than that. We just have to be the people who says there are other people who can provide something. And in fact, maybe those other people will provide a fresh lens on it that will even elevate this more than we thought was possible. We have to know that diversity doesn't equal risk, that we are better because of it, and that we have to sometimes go outside what is our comfort zone in order to be better at the work we do. And it's just better for our business. That's just let's take the fatigue around this out of it and recognize that you're not going to get tired of, Procter & Gamble giving you tens of millions of dollars for this, right? Because that's what our business is. You have to embrace the fact that part of that is also making sure that the content you create is for the audiences we're creating it for, right? So the fatigue around that, until we get to a place where I absolutely, have nothing to do, then we still got to keep doing it, right? Like, we still got to
When your
keep
work
doing
is
it.
done.
When my work is done.
I mean, and it's how much better might the property be if the crew isn't walking on eggshells because they're scared of the bully at the top? Like that, it seems like such an obvious, people are going to be more relaxed and more creative and actually make a better product at the end of the day. No matter how great you think it is now with the guy being a jackass, it could only be so much better. And let's circle back on the fatigue of it all. I know it was very intense in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered and everyone, racial reckoning. And we're really going to talk about this and serious Hearts and Minds tour. And it feels like we're having a bit of a pullback and a bit of a backlash, and certainly politically massive backlash. And it's also the time where, if you haven't gotten on board with the Hearts and Minds tour at this point, what are we even doing? So what are we going to do? How do you think we keep momentum when the white people are tired of talking about it?
Well, I will go back to the business of it first. Like that's the quick answer. It's good for our business. You're never going to get tired of doing things that are good for our business. So you shouldn't do that. But the real me is like, if you're tired, imagine how I feel as a Black woman.
Imagine.
Like, imagine, right? Like, I don't get a chance to say I'm tired of this and just walk away from it, right? And it's not just because it's my job, it's because it's my life, Like, I don't get a chance to not worry about the fact that oftentimes media portrays my son as a bad guy because he's Black and he has locks in his hair and often wears a hoodie. They don't know the fact that he got basically a perfect score in his SAT and went to a great school and all of that kind of stuff. Like, they don't know the fact that he is probably has grown up in neighborhoods just like theirs, right? Like, or even better, right? They don't know that.
I heard a story yesterday, and I will ask my daughter if I can repeat this story before I leave it in the podcast, but her boyfriend, who is at Georgetown, who's Black, wore blue corduroys and a blue shirt yesterday. And a girl in his class said, well, you better be careful where you go. You look like a Crip.
And he probably didn't even know what a Crip was.
He grew up in Malibu. Let's be clear.
Right, okay, exactly. He grew up in Malibu.
He was looking super cute in his blue outfit walking around Georgetown.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And so the importance of this, why that we don't have the luxury of having fatigue over this, is because we also have the responsibility of creating content, whether that content is for the big screen, the small screen, or the gaming. And even in games, like, we work with our games division a lot. Games are the first thing that most kids have in terms of media their eyes on. The way we portray people on that, if your games, I don't know, like in those card chiefs or whatever games that they are, if all the bad guys are kind of dark skinned and blah blah blah, that's telling. That those are images that are imprinting the minds of our society. And so as long as I can't be tired by it, then you don't have the luxury of being tired of it either. So that's
the definition of privilege right there. If you could walk away from the conversation and not be bothered about it, that's a little privilege. If you're curious what that was.
I'll tell you right now, I don't care if my son approves this or not. He has not renewed his car. He's getting a smog check on his car, and, he's like dragging his feet and hasn't done it. And his registration is going to expire like Monday. And also he doesn't know where his license is. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to get pulled. I'm going to take your keys from you.
Nope.
Like, you will not be able to drive because you are a Black man driving a car in a white neighborhood, right? And you're going to have expired registration and no license.
You can't take that risk.
You can't So the reason why we can't have fatigue about this is because I will have sleepless nights worrying about that, right? Because society says he's a bad guy.
Right. And that's real, and it's persistent.
Yeah. So that's why, the importance of the stories we tell and who gets to tell those stories cannot be we could not, magnify it more. It's so important. And it's not just, by the way, unscripted. I would say, I think we do a good job of it here, but I will say that when my kids were younger, we would listen to the local newscasts. And if they talked about a crime happening and they described they always tend to describe the perpetrator by their diversity. And if they didn't, we were like, oh, they must be white because they didn't say
They
it,
never
right?
say a white man.
They never
doing
say it, a white man, right?
Well, it's a given.
That again, you're calling out the fact that it was a brown person, a black person, a yellow, whatever. You're calling, but you don't if it's a white person. And what that does, the imprint that does on people listening, is saying that every crime that happens is by a person of color. And that affects our society. That's why we can't have fatigue over this, because it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Well, it's life and death, and it's real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so that keeps you going.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you hope?
Oh, I often say that I was born with rose-colored glasses on, and that oftentimes people have to say to me, bitch, pull those glasses off. You need prescription. So I will say that happens to be just my kind of how I go. I just, look, I think that numbers don't lie. And I recognize that I'm a person that is very much the story person. I like to, I like pictures. I like whatever. Like if you give me numbers, I'm like, huh, what are you talking about numbers? But I know the numbers don't lie, right? So I know the importance of showing people, because oftentimes a showrunner will say, or a colleague will say, oh, I have, this brown person next to me. We're doing really good in the Latino space. But that's the only brown person that's in the whole department, right? So unless you show them, this is where you are, and this is the history of promotions in your department. This is the history of whatever. Like this is your retention levels. Like we have to show them. So the numbers give me hope now. Like for a person who hates numbers, they actually give me hope, because I'm hopeful that once shown these numbers, people will recognize that they're not doing as good as they think they were, right? And that once you show people the numbers and the audiences that are thirsty, that are hungry for more authentic stories that represent the way they look, represents things in their lifestyle, and that's good business, that gives me hope that we'll have more. I mean, we are an industry that chases the heat, right? So please, Blue Beetle, do well, that because it will make sure that other shows, other movies like the success of Blue Beetle will drive Blue Beetle television shows, will drive Blue Beetle sequels. It will, drive so much, right? And so I hope that people come out and support these things, but that gives me hope, because I think that the numbers just don't lie.
Well, and it's you can't argue with them, and how people feel about something is often so very different. And, it dispels the myths like, oh, a Black Panther was an anomaly. Oh, A League of Her Own was an anomaly, but actually I think the most recent Hollywood diversity report that came out, the films directed by women and people of color made more money.
And often were made for less money.
Exactly.
They often were made for less, and they made more. And also, if you look at a show like Issa Rae's Insecure, unapologetically Black, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? The white audiences were as large, if not larger, than the Black audiences watching that.
Delicious. Delicious,
right? The story is universal, right? So this is what I say to a lot of writers, when they want to write, I often say you can't write to an Indigenous writer. You can write about your specific experience as long as you tell it in a universal way, right? So the greatest example of that, I will use the Indigenous community. I had a writer once who was Indigenous, and they really just, wrote a fry bread story on the reservation, and the script didn't really resonate with people. I had another Indigenous writer who wrote a story about a guy who's a football player, and his sister gets raped. in the casino on one of those reservations. So he comes home and he has to deal with that. And like I got to see the life on the reservation and their culture, but it was told through a story that everybody else could really embrace or understand, or that was universal. And I think that is what we have to recognize. Like, all of our stories are universal. It's the specificity of it. It is the diversity of those stories that changes them. I mean, remember I said earlier, there's only like 5 or so stories in the world. It's the diversity of those stories that make them more exciting and interesting.
Karen Horne, thank you so much.
Julie, thank you so much for having me. I love talking to you. Have me back. I had a great time. You're the best.
You're the best.
You're the best.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A History of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. Thank you to Karen Horne for sharing her guidance. Special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and rate and leave a review if this is meaningful to you to help other people find it. If you have a company you would like to be a sponsor, help keep this thing going, please reach out. You can find me and my work at julieharrisoliver.com. If you're looking for simple yet effective tools to bring to your production, or even just want some help in starting to talk about it, give me a call. I'd love to work with you. And go check out the Catch a Break podcast, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating the entertainment industry. Coming in July, we have our Project Greenlight season to go along with the series on Max. We are so excited about it. Thanks for listening. See you next time.